Good day to everybody everywhere. Thank you once again for joining us for the Shanghang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. Here, from our baseline of traditional Tibetan medicine studies, we discuss topics of health and wellness. We explore tools from Eastern and Western traditions, from ancient spiritual philosophies and healing sciences, along with modern research and current issues in global public health. We would love to collaborate and connect with you, so please like and subscribe, follow us, and join our email list if you can. So this week on our webinar, we talk with Dr. Jeanine Canty of Naropa University about the vital connection between environmental healing and our human health. We will explore our own relationship to the natural environment, the modern and traditional cultural views of this relationship. Dr. Jeanine Canty shares her immense knowledge of environmental sciences, ecology, and social justice. Our ongoing host, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, shares aspects of the traditional Tibetan worldview regarding the relationship and responsibility to the earth, the animals, the plants, and to each other in our human communities. We will explore solutions and ways in which we might be able to work together towards a healthier and brighter future for everyone. For those of you who are new to our show, let me tell you a little bit about the Shanghang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine. Our school was founded by the late acclaimed Tibetan scholar and spiritual master Chogyal Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche as part of the greater International Shanghang Institute of Tibetan Studies. Here we offer courses on traditional Tibetan medicine all around the world at various locations in person and, of course, especially these days, online programs. Our programs range from short lectures and presentations to our full-length 4-year program of Tibetan medicine, our flagship training program. We also offer continuing education courses for healthcare professionals, as well as public wellness and educational courses. We have one of those coming up soon that I'd like to tell you about. We're going to be doing a course with our director, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, about how to make a traditional Tibetan medicine formulation called garlic ghee chudlen. Chudlen is a well-known medicinal practice used in traditional Tibetan medicine. It is known as taking the essences. Chudlen formulae use deeply nourishing and restorative ingredients prepared in concentrated form. Medicinal garlic ghee chudlen is one of the simplest and most potent chudlen formulas described all the way back in the classical text of Tibetan medicine, known as the Gyuji, or the 4 tantras of Tibetan medicine. This preparation soothes the overactive wind element energies, this famous lung energy that controls our neurological function, our mental emotional state, and governs the movement of our physiology of body, energy, and mind. So this famous lung energy, wind element energy that we're always talking about in Tibetan medicine, this formula of the garlic ghee chudlen is fantastic for regulating and supporting and harmonizing this wind element lung energy. So basically that means that this formula has the potential to restore vitality, to fight fatigue. It promotes good sleep. It promotes calm, clarity, as well as overall health, longevity, and balance. So in these stressful times of anxiety and new challenges worldwide, we can discover this simple and effective formula to benefit our lives. So this live workshop will be taught by our Institute Director, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. She will thoroughly present the theory and indications of medicinal garlic ghee chudlen. She will teach us how to make traditional basic ghee, and will demonstrate the preparation and application of the medicinal garlic ghee chudlen. Menpa Wangmo will also discuss some modifications to this formula using various other herbs to benefit specific individual conditions. So join us to share in the knowledge of this ancient medicinal practice of chudlen. This workshop was coming up soon in about a week or so. It's going to be Sunday, October 18th. It's going to be held live from 8 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, or that's 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And for those of you tuning in today, if you're interested, we are also offering a special promo code. You can use the promo code webinar10 for 10% off the tuition fee. So please check that out. You can check that out on our website. You can check out this program as well as all of our programs at TibetanMedicineSchool.org, the homepage of the Shanghang School of Tibetan Medicine. And also, again, please join our email list for important updates and announcements, and follow us on social media. And if you want to check out some of our previous episodes, you can go straight to our website, or you can also check us out on YouTube or our Facebook feed as well. So let me also mention an affiliate organization that we always want to talk about, the American Tibetan Medical Association, Atma. Now, Atma, you can check out at AmericanTibetanMedicalAssociation.org. This is the Tibetan medicine professional organization here in the United States. Atma provides resources for Tibetan medicine practitioners, for clients, students, and supporters all across the US. So you can find a local practitioner in your area. You can find a qualified Tibetan medicine training program. You can just learn more about Tibetan medicine and support the national Tibetan medicine community. So we're accepting memberships and of course donations and providing some resources there. So please keep that in mind, the American Tibetan Medical Association, Atma. So today we'd like to welcome our special guest, Jeanine M. Canty, PhD, Professor of Environmental Studies at Naropa University, a Buddhist-inspired institute in Boulder, Colorado. Dr. Canty is a lover of nature, of justice, of contemplative practice. Her teachings intersect issues of social and ecological justice connected to the process of worldview expansion and positive change. Among Dr. Canty's extensive academic credentials, she holds her PhD in transformative learning and change from the California Institute of Integral Studies, as well as her Master's of Arts in Cultural Eco-Psychology from Prescott College. Dr. Canty has been featured in various journals, and she has contributed to numerous publications, including the book Ecological and Social Healing, Multicultural Women's Voices, as well as Globalization and Localization, Emergent Approaches to Ecological and Social Crises. Dr. Canty currently teaches resilient leadership and environmental studies at Naropa University. Dr. Canty, thank you so much for joining us today. It's wonderful to see you.
Thank you
and
so
let me,
much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us. Also with us, as always, is our ongoing webinar host and director of our school, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo is a practitioner of traditional Tibetan medicine with over 30 years of experience in clinical practice as well as educating. She received her advanced degree from the Lhasa University School of Traditional Medicine. Menpa Wangmo is the director of the Shanghang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine. She teaches Tibetan medicine all around the world, developing and implementing programs, teaching students in the United States, Spain, Italy, Russia, and many places, as well as many online programs. Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo is the co-founder of the American Tibetan Medical Association, Atma, the Tibetan medicine professional organization in the United States. Menpa Wangmo, as always, it's wonderful to see you, and thank you for hosting our webinar today. And today I will be your moderator. My name is Adam Okerblom. I'm a doctor of acupuncture and oriental medicine, a practitioner and educator of Tibetan medicine. I'm an alumna of the Shanghang Institute School of Tibetan Medicine, and I practice and teach here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And finally, before we get started, we'd like to thank our brilliant tech supporter, Matthew Schmuckler, who's behind the scenes, as well as our team of translators who oftentimes are helping us share our webinars in different languages around the world. Excellent. All right. So Dr. Canty, thank you so much for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Wonderful. So to get started in our conversation, and actually we have quite a bit of interesting ground I'm hoping we can touch on, but can you tell us a little bit about some of your recent work and what you've been working on lately?
Sure. Yeah. And thank you again for inviting me and hosting me today. It's such an honor to be with both doctors. I hope I don't mess up anyone's last names, but Dr. Both doctors. uh, and yeah, when I start talking, I often like to just acknowledge the place that I live. So as you mentioned, I live outside the foothills of Boulder, Colorado, in between two canyons. I feel really fortunate to live here. And I really want to acknowledge the First Nations people of the land, the Arapaho and the Ute and the Cheyenne and all of the beings of this place. And also just to acknowledge that there are so many people and places and beings suffering right now, and to always acknowledge Earth and my ancestors and all of our ancestors. So yeah, just to be grounded in here. And as you mentioned, I am a professor at Naropa University. This is I just started my 14th year at Naropa, which traditionally means you get to take a year-long sabbatical. So I've stepped down from being the chair of the department while I'm on sabbatical. And so I'm doing a lot of different projects. When I'm teaching at Naropa, I teach a span of courses that intersect ecological and social justice issues. My main area of teaching is eco-psychology. I also teach an Indigenous environmental issues course, a deep ecology course, an ecological justice, patterns of oppression and healing, as well as a 8-day wilderness solo course. So I feel really fortunate to be able to do work that aligns with my values and hopefully is serving the greater good. And this year, as you mentioned, the books that I've published, and I'm working on a new book with Shambhala Publications that is really focused on narcissism and how this relates to our ecological crisis. And so we have a working title, but it's not written in stone yet as I'm working on it, but it's called From Mean to Green: How to Shed Our Narcissism, Find Our True Selves, and Heal Our Planet. So really looking at a lot of our Western fixations on the individual and self and our greed and consumption, and opening that up to something that's really turning more to the collective. And so that's been a great project, and I'm really just in the midst of writing. Another thing, we've been doing a lot of events around a book that came out in May. One of my mentors and dear colleagues, Joanna Macy, Dr. Joanna Macy, she turned 91 in May, and right around that time, this book, A Wild Love for the World, came out, and it's really talking about all of us who have been inspired by the work of Joanna Macy. And so I have an essay in that, and it was put together by a dear colleague, Dr. Stephanie Kaza. And so really looking at how the collective, how we can address these times, tap into a lot of the suffering and the realities of what's going on, but also to find joy and community and healing, and all sorts of emergent solutions. I was telling you a little while ago, I just returned from a week of meditation retreat. So that was really wonderful. Actually, it's very hard. I feel like there's so much going on in the world right now that sometimes when you're looking back at a meditation retreat or in the future towards one, it seems so romantic and pristine. But when you're doing it, it's really interesting what comes up and all the changes that are going on. Um, Yeah, and then I've also been working with some of my esteemed eco-psychology colleagues on a non-credit program and just doing some collaborations and really getting that work out there. And let's see what I've been doing a little bit of work. I'm a long-term yoga practitioner. I've been practicing yoga for about 21 years and really looking at the connections between yoga and social justice. And doing a lot of reading and resting. Well, not as much resting, but that is one of my intentions.
I do hope you're getting some time to relax and have a downtime with all of that stuff. Yeah, I certainly agree. Meditation practice can be very hard work and all of this, but it's wonderful work at all those projects. It's really great to hear. So you mentioned your work with eco-psychology, and I think that might be a good way just to kind of launch into some of our topic. Can you explain? I believe I heard you mention before that there's four main aspects of this field. Can you just kind of outline eco-psychology for us? Because you have me hooked at that term. I'm riveted.
Oh, great. Yeah. And people are always describing eco-psychology as an emergent field. It's been emerging for a while, most strongly since the 90s with the work of Theodore Roszak and many others. And it's really focusing on the disconnection that humans have with the natural world and how this has been causing both our own psychological suffering, and actually more than just psychological, and that of the earth. And so there are four main assumptions built into eco-psychology. And the first is that the earth is calling for healing, that the earth is suffering. And all of us, hopefully all of us are aware that we have a major climate change crisis, and we're seeing across the globe changed weather dynamics and bigger storms and bigger, I know where you are, there's lots of fire activity, and we're seeing toxins in the water and the air. And I don't need to paint out the whole picture of climate change, the ecological crisis, but it's really paramount right now. And so really acknowledging what's happening with the planet, with so many species, both animals and plants and amphibians, just across the globe, all of the changes that we're seeing, and really looking at how this is caused by humans. And so the second assumption of eco-psychology is looking at how people are calling for healing. I'm very US centric, I'll apologize for that, but really seeing how many people within our society are experiencing mental illness, depression. We've got just an outrageous amount of people with addictions, whether it's addictions to alcohol or drugs or technology, codependent relationships, definitely to consumerism, shopping. We're seeing a world where so many people are just stuck in the social media and technology aspects and are basically enclosed inside a bubble where they're losing connection with one another and with the natural world, or even with a sense of self. We're very self-centered on a false self. And so the third assumption within eco-psychology is really looking at how the illness of people and the illness of the planet are not arbitrary things. They're actually connected. And so they're interconnected. And the fourth assumption is saying that, and it's often the hardest one to digest, but I think as time goes by, more and more of us are starting to wake up to the fact that the sickness is embedded in the culture of Western civilization. And often I extend that definition to include corporate globalization. So anyone living under a society that is dominated by corporate globalization, extreme forms of capitalism that are centered on corporations rather than people on earth, are under this sickness. And so really recognizing that most of us, unfortunately, are ill because we're embedded within these systems. And eco-psychology is combining ecology, which is really the study of our home, planet Earth, our bioregions, and then psychology, and really looking at the study of our psychologized souls. And even though it has the word psychology in it, eco-psychology is really a counter movement from traditional psychology, because traditional psychology arose within the framework of Western civilization. And so it's really a lot of traditional psychology's goals is to have us adjust well to kind of the crazy systems that we're in. And so eco-psychology is saying, no, we need to look at this bigger realm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Excellent. So taking that, the psychology, whether we're talking traditional or a kind of psychological counter movement study, then we're dealing with talking about the condition of our human minds and our mental constructs. So that easily goes right in to the practice of Buddhist Dharma and the practice of examining our mind from the tenets of the Dharma and from that sort of spiritual worldview. And I know that your teachings and your history really have a lot of intersection with that. So do you have any comments on how you relate your work with ecological justice and social justice with the greater sphere of the principles of Buddhist Dharma? And I know that's a very broad question, but please, just maybe if you can riff on that for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really wide question. And I apologize in advance if any of my Dharma teachers end up watching this and say, oh no, I didn't teach her very well. And I do very much align with a lot of Buddhist teachings and more so with Buddhist practices. And I often call myself like a Buddhist pagan because I straddle different areas. And I love how much of traditional Buddhism is so earth-based, the roots of it, and particularly Tibetan Buddhism. And so, I mean, just the basic Dharma teaching that really intersects the ecological and social for me is just acceptance of what really is, being able to see what's going on in our world rather than projecting a world that we thought we had or we want in the future, but to be able to acknowledge the suffering that's going on and the systems that we're within, and be able to locate ourselves within that, both in kind of the larger view, but also in the immediate, and to begin to question and have awareness and keep reflecting on that and hopefully taking action. I often think about the Buddha himself and how with all of the privileges that he had, it was his true call to critique and break out of civilization, which he saw as very unhealthy, and actually go into nature for guidance and awareness and wakefulness. And so I think about that in terms of all of the faulty institutions, the way that we're so disjointed with our societal structures, the way that we're teaching the natural world, including other humans. It's so important to remember that as humans, we're animals and we're nature. So that's such an important root. There's, I think, something really important in some of the teachings that I've had really emphasize basic goodness. And so really the inherent kind of well-being, naturalness of each being and its formational sense. And so recognizing that no one is born as a destroyer or as a racist or perpetuating injustice, that these are learned conditions. And so for the most part, each being has that ability to return to its natural origins, and some of the conditionings that we've taken on as truths can be unlearned. And it's also for me a way to remember that when I see a person or an institution as oppositional to my values, that to have some humanity in those undertakings, instead of fixing someone as purely bad or wrong, and to hold a more a wider lens of understanding and seeing. There's so many different teachings within the Dharma. I've been, during my meditation retreat, I was getting back to the basics with some of concepts within the Dharma. Always impermanence, I think, is important, because I think within Western society in particular, and this is nothing new coming out of my mouth, so many wisdom holders speak to this, but there's such a fear of death, fear of loss, that we're unable to engage those conversations or those practices around it. I really appreciate working in a primarily Buddhist inspired institution, because from my experience, Buddhists love to talk about death and to do ritual and all sorts of stuff around death, but not in a way that's so somber and painful, but there's actually respect and joy around it. And so I've gotten a lot of support in being able to accept the inevitability of death and of birth and life. And so to see these, where I am, I imagine where many of us are right now, it's fully on fall, and the leaves are blowing off the trees, and there's so much death going on, yet the trees are blazing in different colors and turning brown at the same time, and it's really beautiful. And so really the practice and teachings of impermanence, I think, are really important when we're engaging some of the ecological and social justice issues, because while they are so important, there's equally, in order to engage the depth and perhaps the pain levels involved, we also need to immerse ourselves in the joy of living as sentient beings in a very sentient world. Because if we're trying to quote unquote save a place, so much of that work is about loving and being in a place rather than being in abstractions about what needs to happen with our systems and places. So yeah, that definitely comes up for me a lot. Going back to some of the real central concepts, like maybe the three poisons come up a lot with relating with eco-psychology and I think social justice as well, and looking at these systems that we live under that have a propensity of greed, um, anger and aversion and ignorance, and how we're living under systems that are so full of domination of others, both humans and earth. And to look at that, I've been reading a dear colleague, Lama Rod Owens has a new book. It's called, I have it, I'll do a little plug on his book. It's called Love and Rage. And so working with, sometimes we're told not to identify with our anger, but this book really talks so much about being able to work with the anger that comes up with us around race and forms of minimization that we feel in our society. And I think for so many of us that are witnessing systems of social inequity, both in the US but around the world, and also the acquisition of natural resources, the mistreatment of the earth. Anger is a really healthy response, and to go deeper with that on, what is that anger is about. And for so much of us, it is also about the love that we feel for places and peoples and for justice. And so to see that and to recognize that so much of the anger and fear that we're seeing at this time is rooted in love. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of any other. There's such a huge question. I think the interconnectedness, both of the oppressions that happen with people and the planet, and being able to identify them as interlocking systems rather than two separate issues is important. And also seeing how if we don't attend to these things, if we do something that many people call spiritual bypassing, to be in a kind of spiritual, meditative place, having equanimity, yet if we don't actually get into the painful realities that we're seeing in the world around justice, around the ecological crisis, we're actually in extreme denial, and we're not really living our highest path or our truest paths. And I think John Powell, Dr. Powell, has some really profound writing when we, in Buddhism, so many people identify with just the fact that suffering is inherent in living, which is really true. And John Powell brings up the difference between existential suffering, which is more with Dharmic teachings, versus surplus suffering. And surplus suffering is really identifying that there's certain peoples, and also I would translate that to also certain places that are experiencing more than their fair share of suffering. It's not necessarily the day-to-day, it's suffering caused by the systems that we have created that are hierarchical and put certain people in positions of marginalization. And then maybe perhaps, well, there's two other things I would name is just looking at the for me, a really important practice in terms of Dharmic practices is finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. And so a lot of people shy away from the work of looking at the ecological crisis and also looking at social justice issues. Yet when we have the courage to start working with them, we have a depth of being able to go into really painful spaces that gets matched by a depth of being able to go into really joyful places, which a lot of people do not realize. And that reminds me of the last thing I'll say. I like to go back to the founder of Naropa, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, would talk about warriorship and being tender-hearted warriors. So showing up with courage and compassion as a warrior versus forms of aggression and fighting. And so really recognizing the sadness and pain and tenderness of our hearts and spirits right now, and being able to still make the decision to show up.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow, absolutely. Well, let's go and turn our mic to our host, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. Menpa Wangmo, how are you today?
Thank you. Yes, I'm doing well. Thank you.
And so regarding this discussion, Menpa Wangmo, I was hoping that we could ask you to share a little bit, for starters, from just kind of the traditional Tibetan cultural view of some of these issues of human society and the human cultural experience, along with the relationship with ecology and the stewardship and responsibility of ecology. So now, when I was in Tibet visiting some years ago, I was able to see firsthand that there's actually quite a few people who are living in a fairly traditional style lifestyle, raising herds of animals, being very close to their animals, or tending farms, or living very close to the pastoral land, or just being really close to the land. And then furthermore, many other Tibetan people I saw, even if they're living in a town or in the city, have like some of these values just very deeply ingrained within their consciousness and their dimension. So would you please share with us a little bit about the traditional Tibetan cultural view of a human society relation with the earth, with the land, with the animals, and with nature in general?
Thank you. Okay, so first I want to say thank you, Jenny. It is such interesting things. Really, I learned also a lot. Thank you. Yes, and the Tibetan in general, sort of like understanding of the relationships human to the land or human to the other sentient beings. We have something, it's a very deep understanding. And on one hand, when we're looking like a Tibetan, like a more sort of senior, like even like my age, many people are illiterated, as they've never been in school. Like the modern society, sort of like the elementary school, middle school, high school, college, master, PhD. So many people, we don't have these kind of things. And many people, even they cannot write their names or read their own names. But that does not mean there is a knowledge. Knowledge is not only from the book, but they have another one knowledge. They have another, the knowledge is very deeply like a sucking into the bone, sort of like the how importance of the land, soil, and how important who is sharing that land at the moment, at this planet, how important their relationships. So when we're looking sort of like that, the natures of the land, in the Tibetan, we understand that this land is like a mother. So the mother means is like our own mother is very generosity, very kind, and all the nutrition comes from the mother when we are small. As a mother is hosting us, mother is raising us, mother is nurturing us, and the mother is always be there for us, either physical needed or emotional needed. So same like that with this, our land, the mother of the land is hosting us, providing us all the necessary what we needed. And then no matter which kind of complaint we have, and they caring with us. So the motherland is such a sort of like a kind, generosity, gentle, and they never complain to us. Sort of like this is like a mother, also our logical mother, you know. So we can complain to our logical mother is like 24 hours. Tomorrow their face is the same face. When we more complain, they are more kind to us. So this is really is our like the motherland, you know. So, and then who's sharing that land? Yes, we have different groups of the beings who's sharing this land. Someone being born as the egg, through the egg. Someone being born through the womb. Someone being born as like a naturally, like insect. Someone walking with the 2 legs. Someone with the 2 legs plus wings. Someone is like a 4 legs. Someone is walking as on the abdominals. So we have many type of beings sharing this house. So for that reason is there also understanding is once there is a animals, beings in that land, in that region, meant to be there. There is a benefit for that natures. So this is also sort of like a manifestations, children's of our own mother, sort of like. So for that reason is like the good part of the Tibetan, what I'm going to say, special like the farmers and the nomadic. Our main sort of like living styles up to now is farmers and nomadics. So farmer and the nomadic both is dealing with the soils, with the earth, and we are very sort of like thanks to the land, thanks to the nature. And also we understand like if you want to have a good health, first you need to keep the healthy land, healthy environment. If you keep a healthy environment, now there is a big potential you will have a healthy body. So this is sort of like that the Tibetan understanding of the outer nature's inner beings. We call the Chinug Jigdin Nangju Simjen. So like the outer nature is like a hosting, and then the inner being is like the host who living there. On other hand, we can say like outer nature like a guest house, and the inner being is like the guest. So these kind of like then we are mutually benefit way, then we are living. But still, even though our land mother of the earth is very kind, generosity, everything's giving, but still there is like unlimited, I mean the limited resources, not unlimited. Still is like limited resources, because it's if we taking everything, it's what we needed, necessary aspects, then as a mother has abundant enough to give us. But then as recently we became is a little bit greasy. then we take more than what the mother can give. And then that causing us like emptied the land sooner. If the land is emptied sooner, means is then we will have difficulty issues. So I think now we are certain this kind of thing is starting to facing a lot of like natural disasters, this and that. So all those kind of things in the Tibetan medicine book also they said is like related to these kind of things. As Jenny said before, all the problem is who created the human created the problems. So we are the, you know, like the troublemaker. We could be is if we do good, we will do very good because we are special being among the six sentient beings. But sometimes we do also strange things. If we do that, also we have power, potential to do that. So recent years, not recent years, like last 2 years or 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, I'm not talking recent a couple of centuries, I think somehow we are pretty harsh to the land, motherland, and then special recent newer days. So that is the Tibetan general people understand. Yeah, the nomadic people are very kind to the land, nomadics, and then the farmers. If they do not need it for your life, they never damage to the wood, trees, waters, land, plants, even flower. If there's something needed to make your life something changing, really needed, yes, they utilize. But if they, the extra things, they never bring home because they are very conscious to the land. Yeah.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I remember even regarding caring about the plants and flowers, I remember our institute founder, Chogyal Namkhai Norpa Rinpoche, and when we would get to spend time with him, then we would, people would always say, oh, you know, Rinpoche prefers to see potted plants, and then is not really very fond of cut flowers. So in Western culture, we're always bringing a big pile of cut flowers for someone is considered to be the fancy thing. But Rinpoche did not like to see frivolously cutting down the beautiful flowers. He preferred to see a potted plant. Wow, yeah. So Menpa Wangmo, moving on from that in the kind of general Tibetan cultural view, how about more specifically for Tibetan medicine? And so can you tell us a little bit about what you learned and what you practiced regarding Tibetan medicine? We use many very precious herbal medicines, and very often these are gathered from the mountains in a pristine natural environment, has always been that way, and that continues today. So how does the Tibetan doctor succeed to gather these precious and rare plant medicines and without over exploiting that resource and continue having that plant available for the future, you know, generations to utilize?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the plan in generally we say is like in the Tibetan medicine we say sadimemi jinga yoma. So everything in this planet is medicine. Depend how much you have the knowledge to utilize or not to utilize. If you don't know how to use, everything's poison. So that also we say is when we eat food, you need to be careful. So generally we eat food because of survive, because of to maintain the body, because of to restrain the body. So there are many reasons we eat food. Not only eat food, but also we breathing. What are we eating, breathing? We eating and the breathing is which comes from the soil, which comes from the land. That is what we're putting into our mouth. So that also is directly connected to the land and then the environment. Then comes to the medicine. in general, Tibetan medicine is, yes, herb is a very sort of like rich knowledge. In the traditionally, like Lhasa Menzikang or even the Qinghai, the Chongyun Menzikangs and the Derge Menzikangs. So every Menzikang, we have our own sort of like land where we can go harvest the herbs. Like Lhasa Menzikang, we have two like the regional lands. The land is you can walk, it's like days and the days. So like 1 year they go sort of like a south side of the regions, and then the next year go to the west side of the regions. They don't go every year to harvest the herbs the same mountain. They don't do that. Because land need to rest, land need to produce. If you are too greasy every day, sort of like every year harvest same region, same land, it's producing is differently. Size is different, color is different, and then quantity is definitely different. For that reason, 1 year we go to the harvest the herbs in the nearby the Lhasa city mountains. And then next year we go to the South Tibet in the Lhoka area. So that is also, I'm as a student time, we also do that. This year go this way and the next year I may go to the other. Even we go a same mountain this year, like even that the mountain which year we go, if there is like 5 flowers blooms together, we don't harvest all 5. We don't make empty. We harvest maximum 3 and then leave 2. And sometimes also we, among the 5, we take the 2 and leave 3 there. Because land needs also sort of like compost, to regrow next year, we need a compost. If we take everything, there's no compost sort of like. So these kind of we do. And then of course, as a medicine also, it's a different medicines. Some medicines grows in the Rocky Mountains, some medicines grows in the grassland, some medicines near the beach, near the water, some medicines in the snow mountains. So we have different medicines, different regions. But in the Tibetan medicine, when we go to harvest, that the herb where we harvest is completely out of the residence. So no human living area. It's not nearby the city. We cannot harvest. So where we harvest herb is completely way far from the cities. There's no commonly human traveling or living, and also not so many animals, because it is the cleanness of the medicines, or the land is like self, like the pollution. So this is also important. Another important also, we don't harvest the herb is nearby the cemeteries. This also another one is very important in Tibetan medicine where we harvest. Another one also, we do not harvest any herb is nearby the aseptic, sort of like the like a toilet, those kind of like where the water goes. So the where we harvest herb is like a mountain, clean, and the best, like where is that the ancient, those enlightened masters walked, and then where they did the practice. So the wherever that the Tibetan, like Lhasa Menzikang, wherever they goes to harvest the medicine, either like caves, the regions of the Guru Rinpoche, or other like enlightened beings. So this kind of land we choose, and then yeah, this is sort of like don't harvest herbs where is that the land is used as like a suffering or torturing or dirty or this kind of, we don't harvest. So this is a sort of like that how the Tibetan medicine understanding or relationships to the land, because it's like we agree the land need to be a clean, unpolluted. If the land is polluted, that the polluted, the plan we take, and then also we will make the polluted. But then the question is, who made first polluted? The human mind polluted, completely three poison polluted, and it made the land polluted. And the land doesn't made it by themselves. Also, the animals who live in that land, they didn't make the pollutions. Who made the pollution is that the human made the pollution, and then we are eating. Oh, now we are paying back to the pollutions. Yeah. So that's your questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Menpa Wangmo. Yeah, it's amazing how you're describing this kind of understanding of the big picture and the long-term history of a people's connection to the land. So this kind of long-term spectrum, and just having an understanding of what is the history of this land, what happened here, did good things happen here or bad things happen here? And then what is the quality of this land in this area or that area? So understanding all those things as you described helps those, if people have that understanding, it helps us to be able to know, number one, how we should take care of that land, what that land might be needing from us in terms of a stewardship and responsibility. We can know those things accurately. Because if you just walk on a land, you know nothing about it, then if you haven't learned about that ecology and history, you don't really know what's going on. You don't know how you can contribute or help or what your responsibility is. And then number two, then understanding that sort of long-term holistic spectrum can help you to understand how you can utilize that land appropriately for your own benefit. So how to get the things that you need in the best way. So just as you described, picking herbs from one area that's the most helpful way to make medicine for humans versus another area which is not a helpful way to do it. So that kind of deep, I would describe that as like a deep ecology understanding of the land. And that is something that, in my view, is extremely important for people here in America to cultivate, because many times we have no idea what happened in our own backyard, in our own community, in the mountain, in the trees, in the land here. There's hundreds of years, thousands of years of human history and history in general, and we have no idea. So I really appreciate how you describe that connection. Thank you. Can we talk a little more about that in a little bit? It will come back to those things, okay? So Dr. Canty, I'd like to come back to you now. So we've been talking about this kind of Western kind of psychological model and modern sort of ecological science, and this kind of study that people are trying to wrap their heads around. You mentioned earlier that you said, oh, you know, eco-psychology is described as an emerging field, but actually it's got some history to it. And I appreciate that. And I would take that one step further. In many ways, we in the modern Western culture are trying to rediscover knowledge that has actually existed in human spectrum worldwide for thousands and thousands of years. And I think that that's why many people in the Western society gravitate towards some of the educational and philosophical systems of the Eastern world or of traditional cultures to try and reconnect with some of that spectrum. So along those lines, I have a question for you. So I've heard you say recently something along the lines of, we always hear about East meets West and this kind of synergy. But I heard you recently say, yes, there's East meets West, but we also need to talk about North and South as well. And I was wondering if you had anything to expound upon that idea, because it really caught my attention when I heard you say that.
Oh, sure. And I just really want to acknowledge everything that Dr. Menpa Wangmo just said. I was taking lots of notes and listening and attentively, and just have so much aliveness around what you just said. And yeah, I think this has to do with this whole train of thought that we're discussing right now. And you just brought up the deep ecology, which mirrors so much of indigenous wisdom, and really looking at, I fully agree that eco-psychology and deep ecology and so many of these intersected movements are really bringing back to worldview and wisdom holding of indigenous cultures, as Dr. Menpa Wangmo was just speaking about. And I really appreciate that acknowledgement of how wisdom isn't necessarily from a book and a certain level of education, but it comes from the experience of peoples who have been deeply immersed in the land and have so much knowledge. And so when we often hear, particularly in the US, and I know Naropa, where is my home institution, our motto is around the East meets West, or one of our mottos. And I do like to acknowledge the North and South as well, because often we forget about the larger earth and how many different cultures are wisdom holders of earth-based traditions. I'm a mix of lots of various cultural backgrounds, and one of my primary identities reaches back to Africa and Africa traditions, which would be a tradition of the South. And so I think about Africa, I think about all of Latin America, of Australia, of New Zealand, of all of more of the also northern cultures that are not necessarily included with the East meets West. And so to recognize that every land, even of course, Europeans have indigenous ancestors that were land tradition holders. And so recognizing that this is really important. And even in the West, when we're saying East meets West, we're talking more about mainstream Western culture, but all of the places in the West also have original people still living in the land, and the land itself has this knowledge. So I think bringing that up and naming that is often really important, because we tend to, and I think particularly around Western practitioners of Buddhism and other Eastern traditions, can have a romantic notion of what that means and who the wisdom holders are, without recognizing how expansive wisdom traditions are.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I really appreciate you bringing that up and mentioning that. So going along with that, let's tie into, so Menpa Wangmo was describing and really articulating something that we've been talking about today, which is this kind of deeper understanding of the environment that we're in. You know, when we talk about ecology and environment, it's not just something abstract or thousands of miles away. It's not just, you know, if you live in New York City and you want to talk about the Amazon rainforest, you know, it's not, it's very important to understand our local regional area and have a sense of connection with that, so that we can try to cultivate some of these very helpful values that Menpa Wangmo described, and touch on some of these themes that you're describing. So now, in the United States here on this continent, we know that we are living on land that is imbued with many thousands of years of human history and cultural heritage. And then we know that, of course, there has been an enormous amount of accumulated trauma around that history. And we also know that there is a tenacity, and there are to this day many, you know, First Nations people still living in communities here in our regional areas. So what I was hoping that you could share with us from your expertise is if we want to work with connecting with nature and connecting with a deeper understanding of our region, of our local area, in terms of not just the biological ecology, but also that long cultural heritage. And we want to participate both in attempting to have healing and reconciliation and justice of that broad spectrum, and then also have that healing and justice be part of our tie-in with our own healing and our own health. What would you recommend to people? Because I feel like a lot of people will have a very deep-seated desire to participate in this kind of work for themselves. And I feel like connecting with nature is a really important way to further that. So with your expertise, what would you recommend to people in terms of nurturing that type of connection and using those themes to help heal the world and also help our own personal healing and health as well?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. And it's another really big one. In terms of I'm actually giving a talk at a wilderness therapy symposium next week on cultural appropriation. And I think you name that many Westerners will go into some of this work with their selves in mind. And it's fine to, of course, include ourselves as part of the healing and attending to, but I think it's really important to recognize, as Menpa Wangmo was talking about, in terms of reciprocity with land and also people, that it needs to be a mutual endeavor. And so it's not okay to just take the traditions of other peoples in doing our work without awareness of what's happening to those peoples and places. And so I believe Monday is in the US is, well, more and more US communities is Indigenous Peoples Days, Indigenous Peoples Day, and recognizing, instead of celebrating Columbus Day, who was a colonizer, really looking at the First Nation peoples of the places that we inhabit. And so I think starting there is really important. More and more of us recognize the First Nations people of the places that we live, and how it wasn't just, Native Americans in the US can be a very broad term, but there were over 500, and there still are, really hundreds and hundreds of diverse Native American tribes that have, there's so many common patterns with indigenous, land-based, and nomadic peoples, yet when you get into specific traditions, they become so complex and way beyond my capacity of understanding. And so understanding that there's so much diversity, and that diversity is so tied to the land, and often the unseen forces and the seen forces of that place. And so I think first starting with knowing who were the original peoples of the land that we're living on, knowing more about their history, what happened to people, knowing where they are today. In Boulder, I think this is the third year in a row that many of the Arapaho peoples come back to Boulder for Indigenous Peoples Day, because they were split into two different reservations that are nowhere near. And so recognizing that people didn't just vanish, that they're still alive, and there's a strong tie to this place. And then when we get to specifics of connecting to land And I've so appreciated, again, everything that Menpa Wangmo was saying. And actually, yeah, I have a garden each year and feel really fortunate to be able to eat food all summer that I grow. And in your opening remarks, Dr. Adam, I don't want to slaughter your last name. You were mentioning the training that's coming up on October 18th, I think, around the garlicky and medicine. And one of the things that I always put into the earth in October is garlic from my that I harvested in July. And so just thinking about the land that we live within and how do we have right relationships with our place. And so there's a tradition of, although we don't want to culturally appropriate other people's traditions in order to heal our connections to earth, we all actually have to become indigenous to the places that we live. We need to know about the land. We need to know about the species, both the plants and the animals, knowing about the seasons. And I think a really important piece is just to start with asking permission to be on the land that we live in, and actually starting a conversation with places. And for many people, that would seem weird to just start talking to the land, but it's so important. And I think even more important, particularly for Westerners, because we like to talk a lot and often we're not as skilled in listening, is learning how to listen to the land. And I think that's where meditation starts to really come in handy, when we start learning how to quiet our minds and be silent. New wisdom starts coming to us. And definitely the land and all of the beings embedded, both seen and unseen in the land, often have something to say and often have a lot of guidance. And so when we learn about the species and the watersheds, to listen to nature, and also some of the more maybe elusive realms. I know for me, paying attention to my dreams is really important. And when I spend more time in nature, and maybe if I do like a solitary retreat or go camping, my dreams get very different and very alive with, I would say, messages that I'm not getting in my normal life. And so really coming home to a place. One of my colleagues, Dr. Craig Chalquess, he has a term, which again is, draws from indigenous roots, but he calls it terra psychology, and is really saying that every place has soul and memory. And so if we learn to attend to place, we actually start being able to synchronize with place and mirror some of the wisdom that's coming from place. I appreciated what Dr. Menpa Wangmo said about how particularly with the ecological crisis, it's easy to see humans as bad. But again, we are inherently good and we are really special beings. So when we realign with our right relationships with land and one another, so much healing and creativity and different capacities and potential start to come alive, reawaken.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you. And I want to thank you so very much for bringing up the fact that it is indeed Indigenous Peoples Day weekend. It's something that we really like to honor and always mention. And I'm really happy we're having this conversation today. So, okay, yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to ask you, some of these themes that you're talking about, how we can kind of connect to this innate goodness and understand this innate goodness of each person. And one way that you mentioned that we can kind of begin to work in that realm or that theme is by kind of having a kind of supplication aspect attitude with the land that we're in, sort of asking permission, asking questions, being available to listen on a deeper level. And that idea of asking permission to even just be in a place, what is, I would suspect, sounds very foreign or very strange to many people, because in our Western culture we have this we have a lot of sense of entitlement, and a lot of, I think it's difficult to wrap our heads around the idea that maybe we should actually be sitting down and participating in a collaborative relationship with the land or the plants or the animals, or even oftentimes other people. So I feel like maybe this is some of the themes that you're going to be working with in your new book you mentioned. So I wanted to ask you, is some of this kind of asking permission and opening up that space to collaborate and have a relationship and get over some of that entitlement and that narcissism, is this some of the themes that we're working with when we talk about going from mean to green? And if so, do you have anything else you want to tell us about that?
Oh, yeah, that's yes, exactly. In our Western culture, and I would, really even isolate that to kind of Western US culture, particularly. And then when we look at positions of privilege within US culture, really looking at that, that, as you said, there is a huge issue with entitlement. And many of us, the kind of narrative of living with the US has been that the US is the best place in the world, and we're better than others. And if you are kind of the American, quote unquote, American US narrative is that if you work hard enough and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, you can have this dream, which is really about a lot of consumerism and economic wealth, a lot of things. And it's not really looking into the quality of what type of person we are and how we serve others, and just our compassion and caring. So we've really gone off track with our mainstream US narrative. And so now even people who don't have economic privilege see that through the media, that we should be accumulating all these things and we should be these very important, entitled people. So we have a culture that is extremely narcissistic. I think about, a lot of young people and a lot of people my age are constantly, taking selfies and posting on their social media, and, and we're required to do a certain amount of self-promotion just to earn a paycheck, yet it's out of balance. And so it's really easy to get looped into being addicted to ourselves, and just always self-referential. And with my work, I understand a number of years ago, I had a really eye-opening experience with someone who exhibits a lot of traits of narcissistic personality disorder. And it was really alarming. And I had never really, I knew a little bit about it, and I knew a bit about narcissism through some of the early eco-psychology writers brought it up in its relationship to consumerism, how we need so much stuff, and our sense of, again, entitlement to so many things, and that our stuff is actually kind of a promotion of our own worth rather than our true inner worth. And so I started studying more deeply narcissistic personality disorder, and realized how much this mirrored much of our culture. Yet we look at often narcissistic personality disorder and narcissism as an individual problem, rather than a collective problem. And that's essentially what eco-psychology is critiquing traditional psychology for so many Westerners, definitely the Boulder community. Everyone has at least one therapist, and the goal is all around oneself. And so we're constantly navel gazing at ourselves. And with the ecological crisis, some of our personal problems are actually directly related to what's going on in our world, yet we get so addicted to our individual sagas around relationships and child rearing and what we look like and our work life, that we forget to lift our head up and look at the larger world. And so many of us have so much privilege, but don't even acknowledge that and express gratitude. Instead are often more greedy for more. And so one of a great wisdom holder, Maladome Some, talks about, and other wisdom holders also express the same theme, is that if one member within our community is really ill, it's not about that person, it's actually about the larger community. And so if we're not addressing these issues in a larger realm, we're basically not taking care of one another, and we're not looking at our collective disease. And so, yeah, I was really, really fascinated with this. I'm really fascinated with it as I'm in the throes of writing and reflection and studying. But it, to me, speaks to the heart of so much of our destructive nature that's going on right now within people, particularly within the United States, and treating other people badly, treating the planet badly, and even just treating ourselves poorly. Existing, getting our sustenance from things that are actually not healthy. And recognizing that there is a whole nother way of being, similar to what Menpa Wangmo is talking about, of like these healing properties of the world. Inherently, there's so much healing available to us, so much sustenance and nurturance, but we actually have to turn our work, our attention, our relational qualities towards that. And when we do, I love the metaphor of a mother who takes care of us. And I know it's not a metaphor, that it's actual reality, but so many of us have lost that connection. It's really sad. And when we can start reorienting ourselves to these greater capacities and realities, and learning, I think so much of it has to do with that humbleness and that grace, and that learning to ask for help and be of help to others, which isn't necessarily in a lot of our mainstream conditioning. Often we're taught just to look out for number one and to like go get yours, rather than to look out for one another and to give.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for everything that you've shared with us today. So before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to share with us? And how can our audience connect and learn more about your next projects and connect with you a little more in the future?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's, yeah, I think that's the main things that I want to share. And I'm pretty active. I try not to be a constant poster and that kind of stuff on social media, but I try to keep kind of presentations and publications up to date on I have definitely have Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm a little more private on Facebook, but I have a Facebook page. Uh, and then my professor page on Naropa's website, I try to update that at least once or twice a year. And, you can always just look me up on the internet and to see what I'm doing. But probably in about a year and a half, it's a year and a half, hopefully sooner, the next book will come out. And I usually always have some sort of next speaking engagement, or hopefully this year I'll be doing a lot of learning too. I love being a perpetual student. So yeah, I think that's the main ways. And I just really want to extend my deep gratitude to both of you for seeking me out and hosting me. I feel really humbled to be in your presence and to be included in such an important dialogue. And yeah, I felt really teary in a good way listening to the wisdom that has been shared. And yeah, hopefully I'll get to study with Menpa Wangmo in the future a little bit. I would love that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Canty. Yes, we really are delighted to have you sharing this forum with us and really helping us to explore some of these ideas and really broaden our horizons from our basis of Tibetan medicine and see how we can integrate that discussion into some of these themes. So thank you so much. And now as we begin getting close to wrapping up, I'd like to go to Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo. Menpa Wangmo, can you just tell us anything else you would like to share, especially regarding the Tibetan medicine view of connecting with nature and connecting with this deeper ecological sense, connecting with the compassion, with the earth and the people and the history, and just however you'd like to summarize for us, please.
I want to really say thank you to Jenny. Such wonderful, such really honored to listen all what you said. Yeah, as we said before, so number one, I think we all need to sort of like either Tibetan medicine or this medicine or that medicine or whatever we're doing. Everything what we put in our mouth is coming from the earth, not coming from the sky, not coming from the somewhere in the middle earth, middle of the sky. Everything coming from the earth. So this is number one. So we need to, this is also, we do not need really a scientific proof, this or that. It's very logical. Everything what we put into our mouth is coming from the soil, coming from the land. And also everything what we're using today in the house is coming from the soil, coming from the land. Included what we eat, drink, breathing. So what we're breathing is essence of the elements, which belongs in the land, it belongs in the nature. So this is one sort of like important things. And then the second thing is the important is not only that they like acknowledge the land, that's where our food is coming, but also acknowledges who is working on that. So this is also very important, because we are living in the city, we go to the market to buy things, and then we judging is good or bad or delicious or not delicious. We forget to say thank you who worked for this, who dedicating for this job. So I think very important, we should thank all those farmers. Thank God, their dignity, their humbles, their kindness, they're taking care of our land and then producing food for us. And then number one, really, we should thank them, and then we should remember them all the time, because this job is a very tired job. And also probably they're making the money aspect is the minimum aspect of the money. For sure, they're not making like $100,000 an hour. Absolutely not. So they make very little money, work like 7 days a week. That the sense that early morning when is the dawn appears, and until to the late evening. That's the reason also someone said to me, the American change twice a year the hours, because for purpose for the farmers, which means they need to work, get up early, very early morning, and then go to home late evening, because it's like taking care of the land is looks like taking care of a children. We had, when I grown up time, we also have gardens, we are farmer. So to taking care of a green vegetables like daikon, it looks like taking care of your children, because every day you need to work that, touching that, otherwise the daikon is not coming. Without work, daikon is not coming. For this kind of reason is land is important, who works is important. And also for that reason is I think important we use what we needed and then not waste what we do not need it. So this is also important. Also, this is the Tibetan medicine views, because Tibetan medicine view is sort of like also we call as Ecology Yala number dun. So the 7 important points for the herbalist. So that also like that the how we take care of, how we harvest, how we detoxify, how we changing the cleans, how we dries, how we formula, so on and so forth. Same like that way also how we get the greens, how we chop the greens, how we cook the greens, how we eat the greens. It's the same, sort of like basically it's the same protocol. So this is, I think, important. So thanks to the land, thanks to the people who works, dedicating to them. And we imagine I'm eating something nutritional food. So that way everything what you put into your mouth, spoon by spoon, mouth by mouth, each mouth we should think into the food things and then the nutritions. So that also is a benefit to our health. So this is also, I think, is a, what I want to say is important. The another one also like we think that the people's what we working seeing, we don't judge to anyone. Just think is like all sentient being is like holding this mother, like we all like same mother. So even we don't want to think, or we don't have capacity to think all sentient beings, but as we think all the human beings, we are brothers, sisters. Because there's no 2 or 3 hospitals different. One goes to this group and the other one goes that group. No, we don't have, which means is we are same human. This religion or that background or this background, this color or that color, is it taller or smaller, bigger or shorter? Is we all same. So this is also important, because if we respect to the land, respect to the people, that means respect yourself. That shows how you grown up. That shows really how your deep knowledge or deep understanding. That means you are a person grown up. That shows also like respecting yourself. So we do respect more to the people and reflect back, and we stay healthy. So because we respect to the peoples, we kind to the peoples, we don't have fears, worries, anxieties, those kind we don't have. If we don't have that, automatically we will be healthy. So it's our own health important to respect to all the lands, natures, beings in this land, and special all the human beings. So this is really, it's very important. So after this, the pandemic, I think each of us learned how important of the kind each other, how important the loving each other, how important the supporting each other. So it's something comes is not something we can control. Only what we needed last minute is the kind, loving support. So I really hope each of us learned something from this pandemic. I mean, pandemic is badly something happened, but the good part, maybe we learned something. What is the main important part? What we need. So that's I want to say.
Thank you so much, Menpa Phuntsog Wangmo, and thank you for being with us and hosting us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Canty, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and we wish you all the best for the future. Hopefully, we will get to connect with you again. As Menpa Wangmo said, maybe even in person someday.
Yeah, I think we should really. I'm looking forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you to our viewers. Thanks for tuning in with us. This, once again, has been the Shanghang School of Tibetan Medicine webinar series. And you can tune into our past episodes on our website, tibetanmedicineschool.org, or check us out on YouTube. And please do join our email list and follow us for important updates about our courses and our programs. We're wishing you all many blessings and the best of health. And we hope you enjoyed our show today. I'm Adam Okerblom, and we will see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, all the
Thank you.
all the teams, and all the audience listeners. Thank you.